So everyone, how's it going? This is the second part of the interview with Tommo. So yeah, if you've seen the first one, it was last week we previewed the Russian Grand Prix. So this one's more of a chat about how Tommo's impact on Formula One for the YouTube side has really taken off since 2019. He is such a sound guy and I really enjoyed the chat. So make sure to like the video, subscribe to Crash F1 for more content, and enjoy the video. Welcome to the Crash F1 YouTube channel, and I'm joined by a familiar face of YouTube and Formula One. It's Tommo F1. Tom, how you doing, mate?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for having me. It's absolute my pleasure. I love talking about myself, so perfect place now. Who
Perfect.
doesn't?
So this is a new series, everyone. We're just going to talk to people that you see on screen during a race weekend, but on the YouTube side. So Tom was the first person of this series, and like I say, he likes talking about himself. So let's perfectly slide into Tommo on YouTube. So Tommo, you've been doing YouTube for the F1 side since August 2019, and it's fair to say your channel has just skyrocketed. You're near 250
Mm.
subs now, so or 250,000 subs, should I say? Could you have pictured that sort of growth?
Mate, no. I mean, it's been a that's the thing for people who kind of know my kind of backstory. I've been doing YouTube for a lot longer than
Yeah,
that, but obviously F1 again, like you said, August 2019. That's when I started the F1 channel. So, it was for me. It's been a hobby for a long time, kind of making videos. It used to be about football. Now it's about Formula One. And no, I mean, for 4 years I was making football videos, and I got about 400 subscribers. I've been doing this since August 2019, and now I've got what 217,000. No, it's mad, and obviously it's a multitude of factors that have gone into that. You know, a huge slice of luck. First and foremost, the algorithm has to help you out, but also obviously just learning over time, getting better on camera, improving my editing skills, all of that I think has just come together for me. Perfect storm. I'm not like I'm 28 now, so I'm not like I'm a bit older than a lot of the other creators. Um, but at the end of the day, like yeah, age is but a number. Okay, but yeah, I could never have foreseen it would turn out the way it has, and it's given me, I guess, the one thing that I've always kind of wanted in my adult life. I've never really been money oriented, but I've always been like freedom oriented. And
yeah.
this has given me that. And for that, I'm just incredibly grateful, honestly, just to be able to talk about the sport I love and, happen to earn money doing it as well. It's an absolute privilege.
Yeah, like you say, you were doing YouTube for 4 years, and you were doing it in a market of football where
Mm,
you've got FIFA YouTubers, you've got just everyone just talking about football.
mm,
You have to stand out from the crowd, and like you say, it
mm,
became quite saturated, you know, and it's hard to really stand out because you
mm,
could be the most passionate person ever about football, but someone who's been in the game long enough is just
mm,
taking it away from you.
mm.
You know, you moved across the F1, and of course you're passionate about it. And at that time, there was no real, how can I say, 2019, there was a lot of, you know, gaming for F1. That was the
Yeah,
real
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
I think since you've
definitely.
started that, it started a trend of yourself, Josh Rebel, you came a long way for like in a short space of time.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Like I think me, Josh, Aldas, and Nick Cranky
Yeah,
Yankee, we all kind of started at a similar. Aldas, I think, was kind of the first actually. In terms, obviously, again, it's one of the things. There's always been people making content on
yeah,
YouTube about F1, but really kind of applying that. The kind of fan perspective that I used to do with the football stuff, and just applying that same
yeah,
um, method of content creation. And just I'm not an expert. I don't claim. Well,
yeah.
obviously I've learned a lot about the sport now, so I've got a lot of sport knowledge now, but I don't claim to be a journalist. I don't claim to be like a professional in this instant. I'm just another fan who's speaking their minds and talking about the sport, and trying to do it, I guess, in a less kind of because obviously with football, I'm a West Ham fan. That's my bread and butter. I
Yeah.
care more about West Ham than I do, the sport in general, whereas I think in F1 it's a bit different. I've got my favorite drivers. I love Alex, I love Lando, I love Daniel. You know, I like certain teams maybe more than others as well, but I try and kind of give as objective a look at things as I can, which is nice. It's a bit of a different approach to the kind of very, very tribal nature that is football, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, we kind of, you know, we all kind of blew up at a very similar time. Me and Josh particularly had very similar kind of, you know, it was his 1,000 subscriber special video that I'm 99% sure fed the algorithm to my Rich Energy versus Red Bull video. There's no coincidence that they blew up at like the same kind of time, and it's just still riding the wave, to be honest, mate. Still just, so it's bad. It's just mad.
It's incredible. So it is. And I think that, you know, when you look at just F1 as a sport on social media, you know, the fact you've got Netflix doing what they do with Drive to Survive, you've got, you know, just the atmosphere of the fans that creates on Twitter. It's like this little bubble that's kind of just, but it's like not a little bubble, it's huge, but
it's
it
growing.
just feels like everyone kind of knows each other on it, and it's like you all get the same thing. And I think that's something F1 has over other sports, like football, for example. Football Twitter is just toxic, so it is. It's the worst place to be on. But with F1, you get that sort of relatability, sort of you can just relate to people that way. And I think for yourself, like I said, 24, and I can relate to you because we've kind of came up in the same era of F1 in that sense. You know, we can talk about the same things, we've watched the same things, and I think that with today's generation, it's kind of the ones that we'll remember. Probably it'll be like the ones we'll look back on in years to come, like, oh, that is the generation I grew up with, you know, and like we really appreciated. But do you think that F1 YouTube could become saturated like football, and it could kind of lose its touch?
Yeah, it's difficult because again, a lot of the issue, like you said, with football Twitter, for example, football social media, is that it is very, very, there's very, very few. I can't think of the top of my head. I know loads of. I'm massively into YouTube, just generally, not just in F1, just generally speaking. And I still follow a lot of football. I don't really know of any, like, when we're talking about kind of beyond the, you know, the Sky Sports and the BBC Sport, those who kind of are just, you know, documenting what's happening in terms of independent channels that aren't affiliated with a particular team or anything. Whereas in F1, I feel like the majority of creators are like, I've not seen like a Ferrari fan TV, for example.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, completely. Yeah.
But again, I think the kind of discourse, and obviously, look, we've seen it a lot this year, where the fight between Max and Lewis has heated up, and yes, there are like very, very polarizing opinions around them two, particularly. Again, if social media existed back in, you know, the Schumi Villeneuve era, the Hakkinen times, in the Senna times, like these things would happen. These conversations have always kind of, these feelings have always existed. It's just now the platform exists to put it out there to the world. But yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a lot more people jump on, which I think is great, because I think Formula One kind of, you know, there's not been, I know there's been a few kind of run-ins with, you know, FOM being a bit strict with, you know,
definitely
copyright and stuff like that. And it's a bit, hence why I dropped the F1 from my name, just to be safe. But at the same time, it's kind of like, I think having a good bed of independent kind of people and the platform that YouTube gives us now. I mean, you know, if you've got an iPhone 12, like, you can shoot 4K crisp. A good microphone costs very little. Like the barrier to entry to just start making stuff is very low, and it means a lot of people get into it. A lot of people don't stick around because it is difficult to keep yourself motivated and carry on. But at the same time, there's so many more opinions and views, and F1's got a very diverse fan base as well. People from all over the world. As much as the actual sport itself is quite restrictive, you have to be very rich, you have to be very privileged to get the opportunities really to get into motor racing, let alone Formula One. The fan base, I think, is very broad, and we're seeing a lot of channels now, you know, popping up that are covering these different perspectives and just talking about a sport which is, I guess, traditionally it's of like an old man sport, a rich old man sport. But when you're hearing people like from my background and people from loads of different like walks of life, I think it helps remove that perception and open up the sport to everyone, you know?
No, you're spot on, man. I think that it's such a weird thing with F1 because, like you say, it's seen as you have to have millions to get into this sport, but the people that watch it, like, I think there's something about it. It's really hard to explain. Like, it's really difficult to explain.
I've got kind of a theory on it, and there's a really good YouTuber called Tom Scott who you might have heard of. He does these, like, he's got millions of subscribers. He does these amazing little documentaries. And a couple of days ago, he put out a video on a passenger lap around the Nürburgring, and he was saying about how, like, he's not into racing, like he's not a motorsport fan, but if you stick anyone in a racing car in a passenger lap, anyone, doesn't matter who you are, you're going to feel something.
Exactly.
Right? Whether it's fear, whether it's excitement, whatever. And obviously because F1 is kind of an extreme sport, but when you look at football, if you're not remotely interested in football, you could go to Wembley and be like, oh, it's a cool building, but you're not necessarily going to feel anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think motorsport is such a visceral thing. And obviously it's got a long history of, there's been tragedy at times throughout the years, and I think it's just I don't know, there's something very human about what they're doing and the characters and the personalities. There's as many drivers as there are Premier League football teams, so you can connect with those drivers a bit more. And the fact that they're putting themselves in these situations, high velocity, high risk, high reward, big drama, it kind of all comes together.
It's the perfect storm. So it is. It's just the emotion,
absolutely,
just the related, like you can just relate to people. And one person that a lot of people have taken to since he's came into F1 is Lando Norris. And
of course,
he is a streamer first and then an F1 driver second. That's the way it appears. What he has done for the younger generation of fans and how he's put himself across is just so, like, anyone, like, it's like he's kind of like the superhero to people. Like, I can see, like, a certain age, kids grow up and like, Lando Norris plays games and drives F1 cars the weekend. Like, how cool is that? And you've had the opportunity to work with him, but throughout on his YouTube channel with Quadrant and stuff. Like you wouldn't have got that years ago with the interaction with fans.
No. Well, I think it's a combination of factors. So again, obviously that perception of the fan base being very kind of old, and you look at, even though drivers throughout the sport, have typically been in their kind of late 20s, early 30s, that's kind of been an average age. That average age is coming down now. It's almost as low as it's kind of ever been in kind of recent years. But I think, with someone like Lando, I mean, the value, I would love to know how many additional eyeballs, how much additional revenue, like just Lando Norris's presence in Formula One, just in the same way that, Messi leaving Barcelona is going to hurt La Liga. If Lando wasn't in Formula One, that would hurt, I think, the broader brand, because he's got such there's that, what's it called, because with streaming particularly, and where he does streaming and he creates content, you get those parasocial relationships form where, like, people idolize the Beatles, people idolize kind of bands and celebrities and whatever. But with streaming, that makes it even more, you feel more connected to these people. And it's a phenomenon that's only really existed kind of since streaming, YouTube. That's why YouTube, ads, if a YouTuber does an ad read, that's a way more effective call to action than just a generic advert. I think that, combined with, the fact that he is also, because I was guilty at the start when he first came in, I was like, I didn't take him as seriously as the other rookies. I didn't take him as seriously as George, for example, because I was like, how can he possibly be, when he is a streamer and he comes, but actually he's delivered on an insane level this year. He's been so good. And it just kind of, people feel connected to all of these drivers, but particularly a guy like Lando, who comes across so well. He's still so young. He can help, he's done stuff with the Sidemen, Quadrant have done stuff with like working with these creators and putting F1 on the map for a younger audience, which it typically hasn't been.
Yeah, because I was looking at his numbers as such for Quadrant when he does his own, when he does a video on it, like say he got the new F1 2021 game and he just was messing about on it, and the interaction that thing got was just huge for Codemasters and promoting that, knowing that Lando Norris is sitting in his room on his own steering wheel, crashing into walls around Baku, and he's having a laugh with it, and he's like, buy the game, I don't care what you can do. He's like, it's perfect, so it is for him. You know, it's like the new TV model. You know, 15 years ago, faggot Austin school, what do you want to be when you're older? I would like to work in front of the TV. So I had to go through university, talk all proper behind a news desk. That's my way. But now, like you say, with YouTube, you can just sit and talk about the sport. And with drivers even doing that now on YouTube, the same platform, you know, it feels that sort of connection, like you say. You know, I can stream, Lando streaming on Twitch, I can stream on Twitch. It's like there's no sort of barrier to get there, if that makes sense. It's weird.
Of course, definitely.
You know, he can just influence so many people that way. And it's just, he's like the marketing dream for any team. That's why I think McLaren signed him down straight away to a multi-year contract, because they know they've got a superstar.
There's value in Lando beyond his, no question, he's insanely talented, but there is also additional, it's kind of like Sergio Perez, right? So Sergio Perez is an incredibly talented racing driver. He also brings lots of money, which helps. If he didn't bring the money, he'd still deserve a seat. No, don't get me wrong. But with Lando, and same for Lando, without all the additional stuff, he's still, you know, absolutely that he's driving at a ridiculous level this year, considering it's third year in the sport. But all that other stuff is going to, you know, help sell it to McLaren for sure.
Yeah, I just think that F1 drivers are no longer just drivers now. You know, they've got their own brands. Lewis Hamilton, what he does with his own clothing brand, you know, Monster Energy, just everything of the image that they have. And Sebastian Vettel, what he's done this year, just they've just, I think football's kind of done that in a sense. You know, footballers were, David Beckham, for example, was the game changer. You know, Michael Jordan in basketball, just everything outside of the track is just as important as what they're doing on it. And I think that it's really hit F1 now in the past few years since the Netflix series has came out as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, again, there are certain players, like you look at the work Marcus Rashford's done.
Exactly.
Outside of sport. And again, we're not seeing every single F1 driver embrace that side of things. And I don't, you know, I know there's a conversation that, you know, are these people obliged to try and push messages that they believe in? I think it's a difficult one. You know, they're there because ultimately they want to win racing cars and they want to win. Some sports people choose to use their platform for exactly in different ways. I mean, Seb does all his stuff. He's not on social media at all.
And it's amazing what he does because his fans push that, and it's such a weird thing. So it is,
and that's not always. And that's not always been part of, you know, we never really saw that. Whether that side of Seb existed when he was younger, maybe it did, and we just didn't see it. But I think we're getting more exposure, you know, the teams are making all this behind the scenes content now, you know, like, and obviously where Seb's matured as a man, I think, you know, in the same way that Lewis, you know, he used to have all the supercars and all the private jets, and now he lives a very, very different lifestyle to the one he used to at the start. And we're seeing these people change. And again, I think that's a big part of, like, I think it's difficult to invest in the individual in a sport like football where there's so many players. And yes, obviously you've got the certain ones that you latch onto who are like the best, but in Formula One, you've got 20 humans, you know, and obviously there's all the background team, but the focus, the energy is on these 20 human beings who are putting themselves in these cars and driving around at ridiculous speeds. And it's like connecting with those characters. I think Netflix has done a massive job. Like, so many people. I mean, my audience it's about 20% UK and about 15% US. And you know, we're talking about US being no one watches Formula One in US. That is changing. And I think, you know, having Netflix is a great Drive to Survive is a great kind of it opens the door. Now, whether people want to walk through it or not is up to them, but it gives them a chance. Whereas before the door's been locked, like the idea of just sitting down, no F1 knowledge and being expected to understand what's going on is a big ask. And it's like Drive to Survive opens up the door by telling you the stories of these drivers, explaining the dramas, explaining what's going on in an easy to understand way. And then a lot of people, you know, come to my stuff through, you know, I've seen this comment so many times. I've just watched Drive to Survive, searched it on YouTube.
Yeah.
One of your pink thumbnails came up and I clicked on the video. and I try and talk about the sport in quite an accessible and open way. I try not to get too nitty gritty. There's some fantastic channels that do the proper breakdowns and I love them. That's the stuff I watch. But I think I've kind of found myself, and not knowingly or not consciously really, but just talking about the sport in the way that I talk about football. You know, where it's not that deep.
It's the perfect spot. If you want to learn about the technical stuff, you'll find it. But I think that what you've established is just a very relaxed and a very easy to understand way. But it's also just, it's like, say we were out talking, having a few beers. It's that sort of.
That's what I wanted. Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. So it is. I think that a lot of sports like football, you have the pundits that talk. Roy Keane talks. Ty talks, just all that, and Graham Souness talks about Paul Pogba in a certain way. But the people watching are going to be arguing about that and talking about that. Yeah,
definitely.
So it's just you find yourself in a good place with F1 because people will talk in the comments about what you've said, being like, "Well, I think this," and then that opens up a whole new avenue, and it's just. I think F1's in the best place it's ever been because Bernie Ecclestone 100%. Just despised social media, didn't want anything to do with it. And it was going down a real dark rabbit hole of just being perceived as, we turn up, we race, that's it, done. There's not this whole build-up of a race weekend. When one race finishes, you get the build-up to the next one straight away. So I think it's
the thing is, with Bernie's approach, I think, don't get me wrong, Bernie, the sport wouldn't have got to where it was pre-Liberty Media takeover as the biggest motorsport. Again, you go on BBC Sport and it's, next to football is Formula One.
Exactly.
It's there for a reason. And in that era, his approach clearly worked very well. But you're right, it was his time to step aside. Because I don't expect a man like Bernie Ecclestone to understand social media because he's not from that generation. Exactly. You know what I mean? And that's the time to hand the reins over. And what Liberty Media have done, generally speaking, for the marketing machine, and obviously there's we're looking at stuff like sprint qualifying as well, which is that's a separate discussion, but that's all part of their plan to make the sport kind of just get more eyeballs on the sport ultimately. And some of these decisions, again with sprint, having quali on a Friday means a lot of hardcore fans who have watched qualifying their entire life can't watch qualifying because they're at work, which sucks, obviously. But at the same time, the reason they're doing that is because the overall viewing figures are going to be, it was 280, I saw a stat, 287% higher viewing figures on a Friday afternoon session in the USA. With qualifying on a Friday. Money talks, and the more people watching, the more value sponsors are getting. There's that, and it's kind of the battle, isn't it? We get that with football. Again, it's football, especially as football is like a proper working class sport, and then you've got this kind of media machine that is trying to monetize it as much as possible, and it's kind of and I think we're going to have the same thing in F1. It's going to be a bit of a struggle. We're not going to lack all the decisions they make, but ultimately. They've got to make certain decisions just to keep the sport profitable and relevant.
Exactly. Everything's a business these days. It's not like the 1960s where you just turn up and you race for fun. It's not like that anymore. Everyone has sponsors everywhere across them. It's just literally, if you're not doing it, you're going to lose out. So you are. For sure. It's one of those things where you look at the teams in F1, and I know you do a series about what if Toyota joined F1, and a lot of teams, like you say, Toyota, BMW, all left in 2009 because of the credit crunch and for marketing reasons they couldn't afford it. Who would you like to see back
in Formula One as a manufacturer? Because there's a lot out there that would interest me, and I know you do a lot of videos on it. So who would be your one team you could bring back?
Oh, I see. Because obviously there's a couple of ways of looking at it. It's kind of, who do I think realistically would come back is a different conversation.
Yeah.
I think a brand that I'd really like to see, I'd love to see, and I know we've got Haas on the grid, but I mean, I can't see the Haas name staying around for much longer. I'd love to see an American manufacturer have a presence. So I did a video with the Donut Media guys, and we were talking about if Dodge returns to Formula One, and how, Nolan was trying to kind of present that argument. I'd love to see an American manufacturer, maybe like a Chevrolet or a Dodge, would be I'd love to see it first and foremost because I think it'd be cool. And I'd love to see it. I don't think Haas really ever embraced their Americanness, and I'd love to see that.
I was about to say that. Yeah, they didn't really not play on
the cowboy hat,
the stereotype,
the flag, USA. I want that. That's what I want, right? I want that. So, but also for the American audience, that would be, if you want an American team to get behind, because 7 of the 10 F1 teams are based in the UK, 2 in Italy and 1 in Switzerland. So it's like, stick one in the States and let's have at it. So yeah, that's what I'd probably say. If I had got to choose, I'd pick one of them.
I would just like to see Lamborghini. I don't know why. I just have this fascination with the time that McLaren in '93 tested out the Lambo engine with Senna. And there was just something about, I just thought, imagine a factory looking just Lamborghini team. Could you picture that? It would look so good.
Lamborghini versus Ferrari as well would be, that's an age-old battle, that one. So to see that played out in F1 would also be vibes. I'd like that.
Yeah, I know, man. It would just be... But I think if Toyota came back, it would be purely for if they could win it. It's because they should be winning F1. They're the biggest car manufacturer in the world for money that they get. And I think they look at their time in F1 first time round as a failure because they had all the resource there, but everything wasn't put into place properly, and it just kind of showed.
Yeah, 100%. I think Toyota would be, maybe they'd run it as Lexus. I don't know.
Probably.
How that would kind of, because obviously, it's like there's a lot of talk now as, Red Bull's engine development, they might work with VW, and then potentially VW would attach one of their many brands to that Red Bull engine, which would, Porsche seems the most likely of all of their brands, which would also be amazing to see Porsche back in the sport. But yeah, I think that there's, I think there's definitely room for 2 more teams,
definitely.
12 teams, 24 drivers, give more opportunities, because we're seeing a lot of young drivers as well. Like, it doesn't look like Oscar Piastri is going to get a shot at F1 seat next year, which seems criminal given his rise, winning year after year. He's top of F2. He might not win it, but he's looking in prime position to. I think, again, as F1's, the brand, the platform that's given and getting a younger audience in is only going to help sell it to manufacturers, because it has to work as a marketing machine.
Exactly.
The Mercedes AMG Petronas team hasn't been profitable for as far as I'm aware, as long as they've been going, but the value that they've added to Daimler and to Mercedes as an overall brand. 10 years ago, Mercedes were just old boy cars as far as I was concerned. Now, every flash twat has got an A-class AMG. So it's just true.
No, you're right. I completely get that. It's so weird when you look at the F2 and F3 drivers that you have. And like I said, I'm a big MotoGP fan. I said this to you before we started recording, and Jack Doohan is someone that I would love to see in an F1 car, because his dad, Mick, he's honestly one of the greatest motorbike riders of all time. And I can kind of see a bit of Mick in Jack, though, even though it's completely different. He's got that sort of fire about him that he just wants to win. And if, say, in 2 years' time, he's ready to go to F1, he's ready, and there's no places for him, like, how is that seen as promoting the future? But you've got people that got 20 million in the bank and they're just in the car purely for that. You know, there needs to be more done for the teams to give these younger drivers an opportunity. I know that they were thinking about making FP1 and 2 on a Friday, or giving them the opportunity.
Give it that, to rookie drivers. I think that is an inherent problem in motorsport generally. It is so expensive, and it's not comparable to football in the same regard. You can come from nothing. If your ability is good enough, scouts will pick you up. You will get the opportunities. You will get helped, and very, very few drivers. I mean, I think on the current grid, the two who've kind of, you know, obviously Lewis, we know about Lewis's story. You know, if he hadn't got picked up by McLaren when he did, and they helped, you know, yes, his dad, you know, helped his earlier career to get him to that stage. If he hadn't got picked up McLaren, if Ocon hadn't been picked up by Renault, because their academy picked him up when he was a young driver. You know, Ocon, you know, the family sold the house and the mechanics, and they all drove, they lived in a caravan, a motorhome for 2 years, just driving around France. And it's like, you know, these, and then you look at other drivers, you know, like Lance, like Nicholas, who, you know, Lance had all the big motorhomes, and not to begrudge much like if I was born into as a billionaire's son, I'd want all the bells and whistles as well.
Of course.
But unfortunately, that money often does stop people who do have that raw talent from getting the opportunities, you know, because these other drivers, and that is a huge problem in motorsport in general, which I think, you know, Hamilton's talked about it a bit in the Hamilton Commission that he put out, and trying to address this, because fundamentally it will always be expensive, but it doesn't need to be. It's like 6 figures just to run a top tier karting team.
I know, it's crazy. I read a report about that, and Toto Wood mentioned it at the start of, or midway through this season as well. He was like saying you're going near millions of pounds to have an F3 seat, and you're like,
F2 is 2 million a year.
You're like, how is that even possible? So what is, you know, like, I think of Antonio Giovinazzi, and when he was in GP2 at the time, he always had the branding of KFC. That was because he got the backer from that.
Yes.
You know,
that was Sean Glyle's. Yeah,
that's right.
That was all through Sean Glyle. But again, this is why I think it's really important to talk about how, you know, if we increase the audience, more eyeballs, more sponsors means more money. And then I think F1 have an obligation to use those funds to support, to make F2 not as ludicrously expensive as it is. To make, because then you should hopefully get more eyeballs on F2, more eyeballs on F3, more eyeballs on karts. You know, F1, I think, are obliged, you know, a lot of these karting races, these top tier karting races, like, I don't even know how I'd find to watch them live. I'd probably be interested. Why aren't F1 directing people to these so that those sponsors are getting more value? And then, you know what I mean? Because I think there is the appetite to consume these lower tier motorsports. I mean, F2 this year's been terrible, to be honest, because they mess with the structure, and no one's been watching it.
Shocking to it is.
But last year I was loving it. I was Yuki Tsunoda hype train. I was on it.
Right,
I was well on it, mate. But that's the thing. I think the appetite is there. I just think, hopefully it's always going to be expensive, but at least trying to make it more of a meritocracy. We want to see the best drivers in F1.
Exactly.
And hopefully they'll get there one day. We'll see.
Fingers crossed.